Okay. Hello, folks. Welcome to this webinar, to this talk organized by the US Student Services. I'd like to introduce our great speakers today for this talk on, student journalism and future job prospects. Shamkhan is an alumni, a US alumni, and currently she co-founded PAKE, which is business dealing with book delivery. Is it
And
the right category?
Yes.
And publication.
Yes.
Awesome. Yes. And she used to work at the AUIS Voice, student newspaper at AUIS, run and established and run still by students. And we have Kak Sama and Ihsan Fouad, who's also an AUIS alumni, business graduate. And he's currently working at Kashkul, working the field of literature, translation, which they have done a really, really amazing job recently in terms of, translations and shedding light on Kurdish literature to the outside world. And we have with ourselves Dilan Sirwan, who's still a student of international relations at AUIS and used to be the editor-in-chief of AUI's Voice. He's currently a news reporter or journalist, let's say in the generic term, at one of the respected news agencies, organizations, Rudao, in the Kurdistan region. As we have, I believe, indicated in the title of our webinar, we're trying to shed light on student journalism, a field that's now very talked about in the Kurdistan region, in the Kurdistan region's universities, colleges, or high schools. Because when we refer to student journalism, it's sometimes just related to student and newspapers and magazines. However, we have seen, very rarely the students engage with that during their studies at an educational institution. When I say educational institution, that's what I mean. It includes high school, primary school, or university colleges. But in Kurdistan region, we have paid not that much attention to it. So and it's very important, and it's very important way to get a job. But what is missing here is that people have not realized that. And actually, I mean, like for our students and our audience, we want to organize this webinar, and then sharing the experience of all these people who have worked in the field to say how working as a student journalist or student journalism have shaped their skills and capacity in their current jobs. So I would like to start with Sham, and please, Sham, tell us your experience with the AUI's Voice and your position at the AUI's Voice, and how AUI's Voice or student journalism has produced that, Sham, nowadays.
So first of all, I'd like to thank you for letting me participate in this webinar. I was a contributing writer, and I partially did editing at The Voice during the time, I think it was in my 4th semester, something like that. So the experience was a great experience. Obviously, I think it's a very foundational experience when it comes to like starting to work somewhere that deals with journalism or broadcasting or news or storytelling of any type. So whether it's photos or if it's something digital. I currently also work in digital media, and I took a lot from my experience at AUIS Voice. So Definitely, it was great working there, and yeah, that's my take on it. Was there another question?
The other question, your job at the US Voice, in which capacity you were working? I mean, as an editor or?
So I was a contributing writer, and I also partially edited, but I didn't produce as many articles as much as I worked on editing. So just making sure the writing was well written, and that was pretty much my job there.
Awesome, awesome. And do you, I mean, like personally, find anything interesting that you feel you've gained throughout your contribution, you know, as a student journalist? I mean, let's say in terms of writing, in terms of you know, how you about, you know, on shaping your perceptions on the world events, on everything, you know, because the journalist lens is way different than how, you know, ordinary people react or see events.
Definitely. What I would, something interesting I found while I was at The Voice is we were producing a newspaper and our audience was students at AYS. But obviously, journalism is very broad. And what I was learned from this experience was journalism online, which is where people usually go to get their news, information, stories. And from what you produce on paper is quite different. So I think trying to make a connection between what is new, what students want to hear, what students want to learn about, whether it's news stories online or whether it's something that has to do with the university and university life. I think an experience, something that I learned from there was understanding your audience, understanding what is it people want to hear, how they want to hear it. So that is something that I learned a lot from working at The Voice.
That's very interesting. Kagdilan, I would like to ask your for your experience at The Voice, and especially you know, that your experience and the relation between your experience and your current job at the news organization. I would like you to share with us, how did that help you get that job?
All right, thank you, Dever, for having me today. So I served as the editor-in-chief of AYS Voice for almost a year and a half, and that was roughly until June last year. So my experience at AYS Voice was different, very different, considering that we had already done. Now, when I say we, even Sham, even Saman, we went to the same school. We had student newspaper there. But this was very different. Back then we were in high school. When I came to AYS Voice, it was a much bigger audience. People wanted different stuff. And considering what we did, we could not really provide news on a daily basis. So we had to make sure the topics would stay trendy. The topics were something that if I tell it in like 2 weeks, people would still care to read it. So that was very much the experience of AYS Voice. We had a good team, even though it was very small, but I always believe that a good small team is better than an ineffective large team. However, there is something that about students at AYS, they don't really care about AYS Voice. And that is mainly why we went digital last year. Because people would just take the paper and never read it. Or sometimes they would not even take the paper when we would print it. And we still have tons of papers in our storage at AYS Voice. That was one of the problems we had. So we thought that, okay, maybe we should go digital. We went digital. Things were very different. People were reading because people use the phones, they use their laptops more these days. And however, even with going digital, we still did not have enough contributors to the AYS Voice writing. So the problem here is people think that writing for free or writing as a student does not really do much for you. but speaking from my experience, it really does a lot. Now, some might say that he's only saying this because he was the editor-in-chief. He had the privilege, and that's why he eventually got the job at Ruda English. But that's not the case. I'm pretty sure we've got people that went to AUIS and were in AUIS Voice, and they also have worked at Ruda English and many other different respected news outlets and news agencies. I cannot emphasize enough the importance how big of a card working at AUIS Voice is on your CV once you apply for a job after graduation, or even while you are a student. An example would be myself. Not only during this job, in my previous jobs, AUIS Voice has helped a lot on my CV. So yeah, that's my input on that.
That's very awesome. That was really interesting. Kaksaman Ahsan, you've also worked as deputy editor-in-chief, and also for a period of time as editor-in-chief. Yes. And Kaksaman was a really, really active student journalist. I personally was interviewed and approached for comments many times by Kaksaman. He did a really great job, even during the Suli Forum, covering the events and doing on the ground reporting. That was very awesome. I would like to to contribute on this matter. It's a similar question that I directed to Shamkhan and Dila.
Sure. Yes, for my position, I was deputy editor-in-chief for. Well, before that, thank you very much for that huge introduction and compliments and inviting me to speak on the panel and the webinar. And yes, as you said, I was deputy editor-in-chief for a year, and then I was editor-in-chief for the next semester, and I think after that I was editor for my last semester. I was not, by that time, it was a year and a half working there, so I was I felt like I had contributed enough. It's a very nice experience because, as Dila said, and as Sham said, you are working with a different audience. You have much larger audience than, for example, a high school, which might be, I don't know, 600 people. And you have, our high school had first graders and sixth graders, so they were not really, so we were just producing for 200 people to read. But then you go to AUIS and it's 1,500 people from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and you're trying to capture their interest. And yes, as the parts that I took away from it, you had to, the things that I took away were more technical in terms of, for example, organization, putting deadlines, trying to have a team that works all around. It is true that having a smaller, more efficient team is better than a larger team, and it was always difficult to be honest, to meet the deadlines. I think one of the biggest issues, as Dilan Sali pointed out by saying we never had enough contributors. You never did. We tried to reach out, we sent emails, but I think that the thing is that most of the times, most student universities are active because they have a journalism department behind it. In fact, I had checked out the the newspapers that came out when we had an active journalism department in AUIS. I think we now have one student in it. But there used to be like 60, 20, or even more than that in the journalism department at AUIS. And when they were there, that newspaper was something very different. You had, on the regular 20, and 20 contributors is a lot, by the way. You needed 15, 16 articles in total, and you had other people from other departments contributing. But because we do not have an active journalism department, it makes it difficult to get contributors. And then you have cases where the editors are the writers, the editor-in-chief is the writer, which I don't think any of us really wanted to do. I never really wanted to write an article unless it was a topic that I felt very passionate about. But because, there's practical things, that there's an empty space, there's a page that's not filled. There's half a page that's not filled. So you have to kind of fill it out. So it was those technical aspects that were quite interesting. And also you learn that, to be honest, teamwork is quite a hard job, trying to get a team together, trying to make everyone meet their deadlines, especially because this was all voluntary. So you can't really, it was voluntary, and because you didn't have much contributors, it was not, you didn't have much choice. You had to wait on that writer to submit their article 2 weeks late or something like that, because you had no choice. You had no other writers. But that experience was not even on the technical side. And to be honest, the thing that I really enjoyed was in the semester that it was the semester that I was editor-in-chief. We had a professor, her name was Maggie Zanger, and she taught a reporting class. And I took it because I liked it. I did not know her before that. She came for one semester only, and she really helped us. She really helped me. She really helped our team. I remember she brought a designer from Hawlati News, which, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a very famous Kurdish news outlet. She brought a designer from there who taught our designers, and then the design of the newspaper changed. We knew what we were doing. She taught us some fundamentals that had not been taught for us, even though had been at the newspaper for a year at that point. But she was such a guiding hand, and that semester was the most interesting to me, because we once you know what you're doing, and once you know what you like. Before that, we had very little guidance, again, because we don't have a journalism department to guide you. And that was the semester I came to you, and we interviewed, and we had some articles on others. That's why it was really active. Her role was quite an active one. So yeah, on the one side it was technical, and on the other side, she came and she taught us that how to, like, she was a very good guiding hand on how to write in a journalistic piece, how to capture attention, what topics to cover. That was her class was really, really important, and she would also have conversations with us after class. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I would like to jump in this time, as I did not introduce myself as an individual who's worked in that news, let's say, that newspaper. I was the editor-in-chief of AY's Voice, I believe, for a year and a half. And my experience with AY's Voice, I can say it has largely shaped what I currently know about news generally, media, audience, public. These things cannot be understood easily unless you work at a news organization or at a place. For example, as Shaman Kagdilan Kaksaman mentioned, about your audience, because this is where you base your reporting and everything you publish or you put it out there. I was very concerned because we had a great number of students, 1,500 students, I believe that was the number of AUI students that time I was there. That problem was, look, maybe a large chunk of that number isn't aware of journalism or do not have any interest, So I personally had two responsibilities. One, to spark that interest in them so they can write for us, so they can write for us and work with us, or when I say work with us, as editors, as reporters. So that was very difficult to do, and you had to rely on personal or friendship, to get people into the newspaper, and that was largely due to the lack of awareness on the importance of student journalism among our students. And we had really, really great writers, reporters, people with what is it called, unrealized journalistic skills. So it needed some investment, so you could find out that they're really professional. They can be very professional journalists in the future. it's a very good asset because you have that people, they speak English, so they can write in English, they can report in English. It's only the resources that you have to provide them. So we were also, beside writing, beside issuing newspapers, we were doing that as well. I personally, when I read reports nowadays on the respected news organization, Reuters, AFP, uh, other international organizations, I can easily deal with it, with the wording, how it's written, what does it mean, the bleed, and everything. And and it's all due to the voice. It's all due to my experience with AUIS voice with student journalism. One important thing that I really like to focus on, and that's what really has uh, uh, broadened my horizon, is when you work as a journalist, you learn a lot more than any other people. You know, it's, I mean, it doesn't matter how much you're interested in gathering information. You can be a journalist because when you go and interview someone, the amount of questions that come into your mind, the amount of curiosity you have during that interview is something unimaginable. I remember I personally went to offices inside the university, for investigative reports about something, and we were like, during my let's say phase at AUI's voice, we were trying to be very critical because for two things. One, it's being critical is part of any healthy uh, environment in terms of journalism or any kind of other thing. So there has to be a critical perception. And secondly, we wanted to get students' attention on our work and on the university. We were critical of. We were trying to have a critical perspective on anything that was happening on the campus. Whether there was a scholarship or a big event like Suli Forum. We were trying to take a critical approach. And I remember when I was knocking on the doors or offices doors to get a quote from them, and I could see from their face that they were unhappy, you know, about the title, about the topic that we were trying to work on, because they wanted us. Of course, everyone wants you to have uh, to positively, portray them or depict them on your newspaper. But this is not the journalists or journalism work. It's PR. It's a public relations. Um, Affair, not the journalism. So journalism has to shed light on things that are unknown to people. Sometimes you have to make things, you have to report things that are not, read, that are not paying enough attention to it uh, by students or by people. So, and it was not easy. It's not easy at all, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting that it makes you very courageous and brave to go, and it really boosts your self-confidence, because then you can see the other person is afraid of something in your hand, you know. And it wasn't only about the administration, the students. It was sometimes students among themselves. I remember we were reporting uh, um, on student association, their promises they were making to. It was we were dealing with the whole thing as a government people thing. So, and that was very interesting. My team was very happy about that, and they were sometimes trying to bring topics that were very critical, and I was very happy for that. And uh, and that was actually from my experience. But all the challenges that you folks mentioned, I mean, speakers, are very true. It's a voluntary work if you do it. There's not a specific budget. I remember personally, I was, because we were issuing, hard copies of the newspaper uh, before Kagdilan took to the office and brought it online. Thanks for it, because we have more audience. Uh, and that time I remember I was relying on my friends, who who are owning a cafeteria or a restaurant, and I was just telling them, look, you need to sponsor us. And I believe a friend of mine, he sponsored our first issue, and was an advertisement for a cement factory based in Egypt. And he told me, look, your students are not going to get there and they have no idea about our factory, but I'm just, I'm doing it. It's for the sake of friendship. It was very challenging. It was very, very challenging to get a sponsorship for the printing alone, nothing else. The whole team was working voluntarily on that. And it was still very challenging because you had to motivate people. You had to tell them, look, you need to work, you need to produce quality reports. At the same time, there was no motivation for them, But as I said, I mean, the motivation for that from now on could come. Look, in the future, you could get a job, a high-paying job, just because you have worked as student journalism, especially when on daily basis, news organizations based in Kurdistan want, skilled journalists and who can also at the same time speak English. And IUI students, I believe, are the greatest potential for all these news agencies, to be recruited by them. They speak English. They have a very good awareness on the world issues, on the world, on the philosophical concepts, about environmentalism, about social justice topics, generally, and women's issues, and everything. And they have already, what's all needed here is someone to come and gather all these resources together and put it on its own right track. And I believe student AUI's voice is a very great starting point for our students at the UIS. Once you have that experience, once you have that name on your CV, it's gonna get you somewhere. Believe me, it's from Kagdilan, and I know personally that people. I'm very sorry, I talk too much, Sham. There you go.
I would definitely like to add on to your point about how AUI's voice is a great starting place. I think mostly it's a great playground to test your audience out and to understand how people respond to news. We live in this age where information is crucial. You don't need to be a journalism student to have studied journalism to care about this. You could be in any specialty or has studied anything, or you could have not even gone to university. But what you do know that is important is that information and access to information is something important. We live in this age of misinformation, disinformation, and all kinds of different news outlets, online, not online, whether it's printed or not. So one of the great things about AY's voice is understanding how to tell a story, how to write something, and seeing your audience's reaction to it. So whether it's via feedback, before you start and go to a proper job, AY's voice is a great place to not test it out, but to gain like a general knowledge about how people read things, how people tell stories, how people give information. So I guess in this sense, which was my job, I would look a lot at the writing, what word you should use in a certain place. And I think Kagdilan would know this very well because he works, his job is to write the news. Words really matter. How you tell a story really matters. And so a great part of AY's voice is, whether you go into journalism or you don't, the way you tell a story or the way you give information is very important, and how people take that information is also very important. So understanding this, AY's voice will definitely help students, in this aspect.
That's very true. Word choice, how you deal with the news, what's your target, and all of that. That was very interesting. Kagdilan, I would like to ask, what's your advice since you work in the field, And I believe as a journalist currently, you know all the gaps in the field, especially in the, let's say, journalism in English language, which focuses on the Kurdistan region and Iraq. Do you see any potential, for our students at the US to have a chance and get a job in the same field in the future or once they graduate?
I actually see a lot of potential, even especially in the current team at the US Voice. They're amazing journalists, they're amazing reporters. What they're doing is very different. I love how they have started establishing into the professional way of writing. They have started not doing these major big paragraphs that we used to do back in the day, and they're reporting like any news outlet in the world reports. I love that, and that would really help in the future to get a job at not just Rudel, anywhere, to be honest. Because what I see in them for now is really what I see in many people who just start at where I work now and they really have no background. Sometimes our people at AY's Voice have even more background, even have more experience than many of those who just start, and out of nowhere they need like at least half a year of guidance until they get on track. So it really serves as a, as a starting bonus. When you have worked at the AY's Voice, you already have the experience, you already know somehow what is news. Even though at AY's Voice we didn't really do news, but it's, you still get an idea of what is a lead, how do you lead in a story, or what background do you need in the story, how do you tell your audience about this whole thing without boring them. These are all things that are very important, and they will come in very handy in the future if any of those people really want to pursue a career in journalism. And it kind of saddens me that most of the times we don't get people who work at AY's Voice or generally at any part of AYS. They think that journalism is not really the best career. But imagine this, you are listening to people's stories. You're not always doing news. That's not what journalism is all about. You are listening to these unique stories that have not been told. You are coming up with these stories of people somewhere in a corner of Iraq or Kurdistan region or Turkey or Syria or Iran. Doesn't really matter. And you are telling the story. You are making sure that they are heard. You are pretty much the voice of the voiceless. So it's very interesting. I would really love for more people to be interested in doing the job. So yeah.
That was amazing. The voice of the voiceless. And I would like to add on. It's not only about the Kurdish news agencies that report on Kurdistan or Iraq. We have many international, highly respected news organizations based in the Kurdistan region and Iraq that want the same skills. We have Reuters, AFP, The Economist, you name it. They are all based nowadays in Iraq, and they really want someone from the country to know the culture, to know the language, to have the connections. They want that kind of people to work for them. If you speak a good English, and if you have a background in journalism, any kind of journalism, that's just gonna, escalate your chance, or your chance to get a job at one of these great and famous news organizations. My personal, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
yep.
sorry to interrupt. And even those well-known world outlets, they would really rather prefer someone that is a local to tell the story of Iraq or Kurdistan region, because usually we get foreigners coming to the region. And if you look closely at their pieces, they all share the same angle. They all share the same concept of, okay, we are the second or third world country where things are really going bad. But a local would not really say it like that. A local would give you a side of the story that chances are the West has not seen. And that is very much what many of those outlets want, rather than having someone foreigner come to the country and report on the country. It's very different.
Yeah, I agree.
That's very awesome.
Dilan as well. You often, quite often, whether it's YouTubers, it's news writers, it's a report, a documentary, it always starts with the same story. And we all know, especially us AYS students or all students and non-students, that that's not really the case. That's not our view of it. That's a foreigner's view of into the country. And it's getting quite repetitive in this day and age. There are people outside, like Dilan said, from all media outlets do look to find a local. But the thing is, how do you make a link between the way we tell a story and the way the outside world wants to hear a story? And it's not just about hearing the story, it's about how they will be able to understand it from our view. And that's where we come in, and an experience through AY's voice helps you to understand, okay, our audience in AY's voice are mostly English-speaking students. Many students are from abroad, our professors are from abroad. So their edits, their comments, you know, students who are local, I mean, all this comes together at this place that eventually will help you while you are looking for a job, or if you have a career in journalism, to understand, okay, how can I tell this story and where do I come in as a local and make this even better?
That's interesting. I really like that, you know, and I really want to shift to Kaksaman, because what Kaksaman and his organization focuses on is, I know it's not related to journalism, but it's very, you know, I want to link it with that perception of because Kaksaman, along with other, you know, Kurdish students, previous students, work in the same organization, and they convey a Kurdish perception, you know, on the literal works they are working on. And it's not someone, you know, a Westerner comes to Kurdistan and reads Kurdish literature, poems or novels, you know, and then he or she gives his her own insights on it. It's what these, you know, Kurdish employees at this organization. And I would like to ask Kag Saman about this. Kag Saman, unmute your mic so we can hear.
Sorry, I said I wanted to add on to what Dilan and Shams said. For sure, the idea that we have these big, as you guys said, media outlets, and they have been doing this for such a long time in such a professional manner that we get the idea that they get to tell these stories. We have to sit back and watch them. But what is often the case is that we, people who have lived here, have a lot of interesting ideas to write about. I remember in the past, I have written about several, like for example, just recently, I had the chance to be involved in a course that was provided by Princeton University, and we had to do a project. So I picked the old houses of Slemani, which are, you know, slowly going away. It's part of our heritage, but it's slowly going away. And in fact, I did find an article, I think it was on Al Jazeera, done by a foreigner. She had interviewed like two of the people that I had interviewed, but it's when you know the language and when you're speaking to all these interviewees, they give you other people. And then you don't need a translator or interpreter. If they say go to that directorate, go to that museum, you can just go there and you can just talk to them. And they're very open. They give you other. I think I ended up using 5 like interviewees and then people who led me to other online information sources that were in Kurdish. So I didn't need translators. I could translate it myself. And then it ended up being well. When I was in AOS as well, we had this class called Water in Iraq, and we had to do a project. And I heard about Kariz, which, you know, for people perhaps who are not from the region, Kariz is like this specific technique of bringing water from like a higher source to a lower source by digging a tunnel. And then it's very famous in Kurdistan. It's such a normal word for us. And then we just did that. We interviewed a few people and you shed light on this aspect. We found out that, you know, up until 1960, all the water that was coming to Slemani was through Karizes. We did not have other stuff. And you don't find this information if you're it would take you quite a while if you're a foreigner to find this information, because it's all involved in Kurdish. And just to add that, journalism is not just about news outlets, as you said, like art. What Kashkol does could be called arts publication, for example, or journalism about artistic topics or cultural topics, cultural journalism. I feel like I've met a lot of people who have a lot of ideas about cultural journalism, whether it is, many people are interested in the jewelry that's made in this region. That can easily be a story. Many people are interested in the clothing that is, coming out of this region. That can also easily be a story. The histories of families, and there's a lot of topics that can easily be made into stories. But somehow, I don't know, it's been understood that this is quite a difficult thing. It's actually quite easy to start, but you would need some help in the editing process, and I feel that there are a lot of people who are willing to help. So I would encourage anyone who has these cultural or artistic ideas in mind, since you know Kurdish or Arabic, for any of, like, if they want to do Arabic topics, you are much more capable of writing that story than even a Western reporter working for The Economist or something, because you have many more resources on you. You could write something about cafes in Kurdish, like the tea shops or something like that, which are so famous all over. And so it's easy.
Yep, that was really interesting. And one more thing I would like to, because as we approach the end of the webinar, is, it's sometimes students say, okay, working voluntarily, especially for a newspaper, is very time consuming. Sometimes they jokingly tell you, okay, have missed my deadline for an essay and you want me to write a story for you. I understand that we've all been there. It's not something, I don't expect them to be very, very punctual, but it's, if you want to do, just do it, because I mean, do it out as part of, as something that as a very interesting activity that you want to be part of it. Do not look at it as a job, as a duty, because that's not gonna get you anywhere. Once you realize you do it for free, if you have that, perception on it, it's just gonna make you feel down about it. So if you see it as part of your hobby, it's very interesting. I personally still sometimes find interesting stories, topics. I write it for The Voice. Kagdilan has recently edited, I believe, 2-3 reports that I have I've written for the newspaper, and I'm very busy. I currently have a job, but I still do it because I like it, and it's really nice. We had a story about the Pope's visit to Kurdistan region with an IUS perspective on that visit. You can do sort of things. It doesn't have to be IUS based only. The cafeteria, the professor. No, it could be broader than this. Okay, there's an election, upcoming Iraqi election in September. Okay, what's AUI students' take on that? How do they think about it? Okay, share the disappointment. They're disappointed, that's okay. Share it, tell them our students, we have students who are disappointed at the political system. You have that platform to convey, these voices usually are not heard by local news agencies, as Kag Dilan said, the voice of the voiceless. Yeah, Kag.
Actually, Dever, just to say, add a point about that, I'd like to tell a story that my current manager, the guy who pretty much leads the English desk of Rudal English, always says this story. He's like, and he's very prominent. He has worked with The Guardian, he has worked with Al Monitor, very different outlets. He says, sometimes I actually wonder, why do these people pay me to do something that I really enjoy doing? You just go out there and you listen for people's stories, sometimes for hours, and it's very interesting. Like, especially as a student, it should be this kind of relief from your classes for 3 hours. You are relieved from your classes, you're doing something different, you're doing something interesting. So I don't see why there should always be payment for this. We have all done this. None of us have really been paid for it. And it should remain that way. It should be something that you are truly passionate about and you don't mind doing it for free.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with what Kagdilan said. I think I've graduated for 4 years now, and I've worked 4 different jobs to this moment, and didn't have much to do with my major. Some of it did, some of it didn't. But my point here is something like AUIS Voice, or whether you decide to join the basketball team or any other kind of community within the university, I highly encourage this, because one thing that I have taken away a lot from working at a place like AUIS Voice, or the time I was an intern at Iris, is you learn a lot of, you gain organizational skills and you gain a lot of discipline. This is something that is lacking majorly in all places that I have worked, discipline with work. And since work at AUIS Voice isn't something where you're going to be graded for, you're not necessarily rewarded for it either. It's something that teaches you discipline, teamwork, how to work with your colleagues, and the discipline of how to write a story, get it done by a deadline. And this is stuff that you take majorly from your student academic life into your career. I highly encourage this. I think students really should be encouraged into going towards the communities and the places within the university outside of their classes to participate, to work in, because the skills you gain there, trust me, are skills you'll be taking into the workplace later on, 100%.
That was very interesting. You know, I had similar, I gained similar experience as editor-in-chief. You know, organizational management, leadership skills. You know, you deal with your editors, your team, the public, the writers. All of that so really shape your capacities, your skills for the future or any job perspective. You know, in the future that are out there. And thanks for mentioning that great point, Misha. As we are approaching the end of it, because Dylan is at work basically, and I believe he has taken advantage of his lunch break, you know, to give us his time. I really appreciate that, and I've done the same, you know. So I'm checking the questions that we're receiving. Actually, we've got some comments, but they are very irrelevant to the topics we are discussing today. So that's why I'm not bringing in any one of them. I'm very, very glad that we held this today, and I never expected or anticipated, you know, to see such, great points to be mentioned during this short period of time, and I really appreciate that, and I hope and I'm looking forward to have similar webinar in the future with the alumni, and really personally appreciate Kaglawen from the student services for allowing, approving, organizing this webinar for us. And I hope we can, as alumni, you know, contribute something to shed light on you know, on things that are not clear or not realized by students, because sometimes, you know, you're during your student life, you're too busy with other things that you can't see anything related to the future. So I'm glad we've done something. And at the end, I would like to give each of the speakers a minute, if they want, to say anything that they have left to say, or as, I don't know, closing statement.
I would just like to thank you for letting us be a part of this. Obviously, our experience at AUIS definitely helped us a lot as we entered the workforce. And I hope that in the future we can contribute even more, help students out. My ending note here would be, I highly encourage any of our students, whether they're in our university, they're in public or non-public universities within the city, throughout the Kurdistan region, to take part in their newspapers at their university or other different clubs, whether it's athletic, non-athletic, whether it's a language learning course, because from each different club or community, you will gain an experience that you'll take with you, and probably will be more something you remember more than your actual classes. I'm sorry to my professors if they're listening, but that's my ending note. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Hisham. Thank you very much for being here with us. Kak Saman?
Yes, I would also like to thank you for inviting us here and speaking, and the student services. I would also just highly encourage anyone, if they have a topic in mind, to not think it's that difficult. All they need to do is highlight 3 or 4 people they need to interview, perhaps 1 or 2 secondary resources. I highly doubt it would take more than 3 weeks to write it down, and you would need someone to edit it, but I think there are plenty of people who would do that, even your previous professors. They would be actually glad. I would just highly encourage them to start on any topic that is very, very interesting to them. Cultural, arts, or newsworthy. It's any of those words. It would 3 weeks of your time is not exactly the most, or even you could even get it done in 2. So yeah.
Thanks again, Kak Sama, for being with us today. Kak
Yeah,
Jidan.
for sure.
Unmute your mic, Kaka.
I'd like to thank you and Student Services for arranging this talk. I hold AY's voice really close to my heart because it is pretty much where I learned most of the things I use now. And I really, really hope that students, current AY students, would do the same, would really do something for AY's voice, because it is in fact one of the most professional, most legitimate and most efficient student clubs at AYS. And this request goes the same for faculty and staff. I would really love for them to care about the AYS voice, because it is, after all, the first English free student-based, student-led newspaper in the Kurdistan region and in Iraq. So I would really encourage students to join the AYS voice. If they think there is a story that they could write, just reach out to the team. They are on Twitter, they are on Facebook, they are on Instagram. You could do it however you want. If you don't feel like writing for AYS voice, but you want to be a journalist, you want to have your pieces published, we at Trudell English would also love to publish your stories if you want. As long as they are good, you have good sourcing, and the things are not really made up, we would love to publish your stories. And that would be an encouragement for many upcoming journalists in the future. So yeah, thank you so much, David. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again, and thanks for the people who are listening to us, throughout the webinar. I hope you have a great day, and stay safe as COVID cases rising again. And that was very interesting and awesome. Have a good day, all.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.